Welcome to Think Fast, where I'm a bit of a somber mood today. 3 weeks to turning 40 is not doing well for my mindset. And I just feel like I'm in a stage of pure reflection about what my future holds as I turn
Your
40 in 3
future
weeks.
holds nothing, Varun. Your future holds nothing. How does that make you feel? Why
Yes,
you
this is
so
it.
like sad about getting older? Yeah, I'm very happy. Like every birthday, I'm just like, yes, you got smarter,
So
chiku ida.
I'm
You
a
do you.
terrible person around my birthday. I am the grumpiest, most like, ugh, if that was an expression, person before my birthdays.
Uh huh.
And generally everybody around me is like getting super irritated, which they all are at this point of time, saying, "It's your birthday, why you like this?" But I'm like this. I just like it's the pre part which I'm generally like, ugh, always. I don't know why.
You're
It's
so
always been a thing.
descriptive. Oh my God.
Yes.
I hope your vocabulary improves in the future. I hope your future
Before I'm
holds
50, maybe
more
before I'm
words.
50.
More
Yes.
words.
Meh.
Uh,
Meh.
yes. But in any case, what's happened this week, bud? What's new?
We have a new
What's
president.
cooking?
We have a new president of India.
Woohoo!
Draupadi Murmu is the new president of India, and always good to see women leaders. As much as you hopefully will never have to say women leaders, but always good to see women leaders taking prominent ranks in the country. So clap, clap, and salute to our new president.
Yes,
Beyond that,
Queen.
our favorite company of all time. If there was a brand ambassador for Think Fast, this company would be it. The Good Glamm Group there was an interesting article about them in Forbes about how they're building a content to commerce behemoth. Considering they've acquired 11 companies and raised $250 million over the last year. What are your thoughts on this article?
Hmm. Why is this starting with my thoughts? Let's start with
Because
your
this is
point of
me
view,
saying.
and then, my
Okay,
God,
so
you
so
know
my
what
point
I'm
of view,
going to say. We've
more
discussed this
than
already.
more than anything else, I think we discussed this last episode or week episode before that. I don't know. I'm too old now to remember
Hmm.
things. The fact that they're finally structuring the business under the three headers made sense. I think that part was good. But here, a lot of the numbers don't really add up. I still don't really know how they're all going to work together. And I think the big question here is if this is a company that wants to move towards possibly an IPO or sometime down the line, what is their path to profitability? That's still not very clear. I know that you have a perspective on content commerce working in India. I
Yeah,
have
which I've said like
a
a
slightly
million
more like
times.
consumer point of view on it, but it is. I still don't see how this is building towards. I think that's the big worry.
Also, I mean, this article seems like the co founders were a part of the overall conversation. It's a
Mm,
very damaging article. Like, unless their numbers for 2022 are like phenomenally amazing, if you look at their, like there's a section on this article which has their balance sheet or whatever,
mm,
their revenue from operations for FY21 was only 49.32 crores, and their revenue for the
mm,
year before that was 43.95 crores. So basically, in a year, and despite these 11 acquisitions,
yeah.
your revenue has grown by like 5 cr in a nutshell. Their
Mm,
EBITDA, like this number gave me a heart attack, because consumer brands by design should, not have terrible EBITDAs. Their EBITDA is like minus 134.91%.
I think there's
It's
something off
just,
with this data because if you see the article right before the data, it says that
yeah.
it talks about people who acquired saying, "Oh, we've grown 3x of what we
Hmm.
were pre-acquisition and stuff like that." Versus the numbers, there is something either someone's
But
gotten the
that's
numbers
what my
wrong in this
point
chart.
is. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's literally what my point is, right? Where like parts of this article are so like damaging and contradictory to what the founders have said. So at some level, you're just like, who is saying the incorrect thing over here? Because either the reporters gotten their numbers incorrectly, though the source says like
Mm,
Toffler and company financials. Or, for
yeah.
example, maybe as a part of the article, the founders reported numbers from Feb March of 2022, and
Mm,
they've used that as a run rate for the rest.
Maybe.
I don't know, man. This article was very confusing and definitely not a good look for those of us who actually ended up reading the article. But on to other things. Guess who's getting rich as
Who is
MF?
who is it?
Savitri Jindal, whose net worth has ballooned threefold. She is worth $12 billion, and you are worth
Well
12
done.
rupees. How does it feel? Varun, how does it
How does it
feel?
feel? It feels very good. Well done, well done. Always, but I don't know. So I have this perspective on people who have billions. Is the fact that
Uh-huh.
how many billions is many billions. So I'm still one of those people who's like, there's a point beyond which just doesn't necessarily have to be in your account. It could be you could do more good, but that is my perspective. But it's good that people are making
You
more money.
sound like someone
And
who doesn't have billions. I just want to say.
I
I
don't
just
have
want to
billions in my accounts.
say.
Someone asked me the other day, "What is? Are you a dollar millionaire?" And I said, "I don't know what that means." So that person had explained it to me. So I only understand millions. Billions are far beyond me right now.
Great. Good add on to this data point. But Slice apparently is looking at changing its business model. Can you wake up? Can I send you some coffee?
I am
What can I
awake. I'm
do to
awake.
liven you up? Come on,
I am
son.
awake. I'm
Rise
awake.
like a phoenix from the ashes. Yes, there you
Come on,
go.
let's do this. Let's do this. Slice changes
Okay.
business model. Okay.
After RBI circular. So I'm sure you've seen
This
what's been
RBI
going on.
circular is just like, I mean, I don't know what the RBI is doing. It's just been this like for anyone who's used a credit card, even if you've gone abroad, it's been tricky to kind of use it in many places. If you
Hmm.
international transactions, and then your entire business is kind of building on this, who really are going to change their business model, right? So I don't get the need for this hyper double, triple, quadruple security on this side of it. But someone please explain the logic to me is my question always.
Why don't you listen to the episode that Amit Doshi and I did on Think Fast? Because we covered exactly what this circular has. And honestly, I'm not going to disagree with what the RBI is wanting to do. But as usual, the intent and actuality, there's always a mismatch in between the two because there has to be some regulation in general, like lending instruments, right? But more on
Hmm.
that maybe on another episode. In other news, plant based meat brand Shaka Harry has raised $2 million in seed funding. That's a terrible name, but what do you think about this story?
Shakahari, I love the name. What a name for a brand. They have my money already. Um, दे दो इनको एक और मिलियन जस्ट फॉर नेमिंग कौन था वो ब्रांड क्रिएटर ब्रांड मैनेजर
Are you
बोलता
being
हूँ
sarcastic? I can't tell.
यस यस
Okay,
यस
you're being sarcastic. Cool, cool, cool. No, but dude, this space seems to be warming up
yeah
because I
yeah
shared this article right before we started recording where apparently Tata is looking at launching something called Simply Better in this space. And this space broadly being plant based meat, which we guys have spoken about endlessly in past episodes. So,
yeah
dear listeners, if you haven't heard our episode on plant based meat, you must go check it
go
out.
back and check it
Um,
out
Yes, because Varun and I are on the fence about how this will shape up. There have been a couple of fundraisers. Misho backer B Capital has raised its first early stage focus global fund. One of our former board members who used to work with us when he was at Chirity has joined them to lead this. Karan Mola, if you're
hmm
hearing us, kindly spend some of this $250 million on investing in ThinkFast because we're a viable and scalable business.
yes
Also, Westbridge Capital has raised $1.5 billion in its largest ever commitment for Indian companies. So, even though money being deployed to Indian startups has never been slower than before,
yeah
funds seem to really be raising money left, right, and center.
that's
Shiprocket
actually
has,
true. If you think
sorry,
about
jump
last
in.
few weeks, I think we've spoken about
Hmm.
this, right? I think everyone's getting the war chest ready for okay, let's wait for the right time to kind of deploy. But the good part is everyone being super careful right now. I think that's a good thing, considering the
Hmm.
madness of last year. This year everyone's being super careful, and you're hearing like all the right things. Like when is this going to
Yeah.
make money? What's your
Yep. Yep.
revenue
Yep.
model like? All that stuff.
Yeah, yeah. Shiprocket has made an acquisition continuing on the M&A trend for the year. I found this piece of news really interesting. Amazon in the US has been slashing their private label section amid weak sales. And actually,
Hmm.
what you should read this article. I got it from Ben Evans's newsletter. And what's interesting about this is, Jeff Bezos had set this target of Amazon's private label, being about 10% of their overall revenue, and it's been stuck at low single digit sales contribution of Amazon's overall revenue, which is like Solimo and all those other
Yeah,
like
yeah,
basic
yeah.
type brands that they have on Amazon. But this is interesting because it's almost like the new guy is changing the rules, like shaking things up
Yes.
and saying that if
Yeah.
targets aren't met, we're just gonna suck it up, cut it down, move on to the next thing.
But that always happens, right? When you go from founder CEO to someone who's an operator, and also like if you think about the CEO right now, he's someone who kind of really built out Amazon Web Services, right? Arguably the one thing which makes the most amount of money for Amazon. He's someone who knows how to run a tight ship. So it's smart to do. Also because I feel at some level there is good amount of inventory and there is too much inventory. And so to be able to gauge, okay, let's not do this. Let's kind of focus on this. I think that makes more sense.
Yep. In other news, more than a lakh Indians have given up their Indian citizenship in the last year, which is the highest it's ever been since 2015. So,
Mm.
Mr. Dugi Rala, are you changing your passport to become
Yes, I'm
a
moving
Sri
to Addis
Lankan
Ababa.
or Vietnamese? Huh?
I want to live in Addis Ababa. I know I have been fascinated by that name since I was a kid. I've seen it in airports sometimes in recent times. I'm just fascinated by the name of that place called Addis Ababa. I don't know which country that is, but I just think the name is amazing. Like, where do you live? Addis Ababa. Like, think about that. It's such a cool name.
What aspirations? No wonder why you're worried about your future, Varun. No wonder why you're worried about your future. Okay, two other quick pieces of news. Shopify has partnered with YouTube to shore up sales from content creators. Interesting move. Maybe we'll talk about this a little bit in our YouTube segment. You
Yeah.
really like this story, the India West Indies one. Tell us about
Yeah.
it.
So this is something which I kind of came across wasn't even a story. I was trying to figure a way to watch the India West Indies series because I couldn't find anything else to watch. And Indian cricket right now is like watching a soap opera because there's always a match on almost every second day.
Hmm.
So it's on. I found it on Fancode, which is owned by Dream Sports. Um, and I dug into the Fancode site to see what all they have, and they actually have a lot of. They've got done a lot of deals with a lot of leagues, etc. So while you've always spoken about sports when you talk about the big guys, they talk about, okay, this is what Viacom's going to come in and do, or this is what Disney Star or Sony Live are doing. You suddenly have someone like Dream Sports
Hmm.
slowly building inventory of series on a platform. And while you also have like stuff like Big Buzz and ESPN Cricket Info who done a lot more of the data side and a lot less of the video end of things, except for
Hmm.
discussions. I feel this is an interesting space to watch because you never know that for some series, especially when the big players aren't there, like this one, when you have a relatively smaller platform take it on, it kind of creates a scenario where they could really have like audience growth in a small spot. And if that
Hmm.
works, because the series is going really well, they've had two matches and both the matches have been like hardcore, like thrillers in that sense. It might make it an interesting space to look at to see how and what role they play in the future.
Interesting. I'm obviously watching and keeping up with all of this. But in the masala news of the week, oh my
दो
God.
वन मसाला टू मसाला वन मसाला कोई छोड़ दो एलन मस्क को अभी मतलब कितना बैड न्यूज आएगा उसके बारे में
Dude, Elon Musk
ही
needs
सूड
like, like that Mirchi and Nimbu following him because this man just can't catch a break. As per this
just spotted
WSJ
on his
article,
way walking up the hill at Tirupati. Elon Musk.
yes, or like, in his like private helicopter to Vaishno Devi or taking a dip in the Ganges. But Elon Musk really
Yes.
needs to get his shit together. Apparently, though he has disputed this news, he engaged in a brief affair last fall with the wife of Sergey Brin, who is the Google co founder.
Yeah.
And this story was just wild, wild, wild west. This guy literally has a child with everything apart from you and me at this point in time, him being
But
Elon Musk.
I don't know if you saw the article about his father, and how his father is having a kid with his stepdaughter or something like that.
What?
Um, yes,
Elon
Elon Musk's
Musk's
father
dad?
is having a child with his 35-year-old, I think stepdaughter or something like that. And the way he talked about it as a very proud this thing that I have so many children and all this, you kind of get. I'm not, and I think the article, and I forget where I read it, had a line that as much as you might not want to feel sorry for the richest man in the world, just like this was what his childhood was
No,
with
no,
his
he has
father.
major daddy issues. Have you read the
Yeah.
book about his life? which is
No,
like
no.
a biography or whatever. So basically, like he doesn't talk about his dad ever. Like his dad is like this like enigmatic figure who is like Voldemort almost in his life. It's very like he who shall not be named. But his daddy issues, bro.
So
Every
that article,
successful
you guys should
person
check that
is
article out.
daddy
Makes you feel
issues.
really bad for him. Makes you feel really bad for him right now. But maybe he can come with me to Addis Ababa, the capital of Ethiopia, as I've been told by Jealous Me. Elon, chalo, chill karte in Ethiopia. And then what is our final story? A final story. Maybe this person can join us in Addis Ababa as well. Ranveer Singh, did you see the photos of Mr. Singh for Paper Magazine, which is all over the
I mean, I
interwebs?
didn't solicit them, but yes, I saw them all over my Instagram, and he is really pulling off a Kim Kardashian man with
Yeah.
like breaking the internet with his little nude cover. But he looks great. He looks great.
the the thing with him is that when you're so confident in your own skin and you can do that, I think it's fine. I think people were just, I think the memes were great. I think some of the best memes I saw was the fact that because the recent news about him buying a 119 crore house in Bombay had come out. I think Atul Khatri made this tweet saying, "Okay, this is him wearing clothes is before he bought the house. After he bought the house, paid stamp duty, tax, etc. This is all he's left with." Was for me the best version of taking this photo into a meme I've seen. I didn't say it as nicely as that meme is, but
Yes,
still.
but yeah, sounds like a funny meme. Sounds like a funny meme. But he looks
But
great.
for
Deepika is a lucky woman, and vice versa.
and vice versa. But although I think she's been on paper before him, if I'm not wrong, I could be wrong as well. I think
I
she has
mean,
been on
not
paper
like
as well.
this.
Not like this for sure. But then, what are we talking about today? Today, we're talking about the billion-dollar baby, not Elon Musk. YouTube is what we're talking about today. YouTube India is finally a billion-dollar baby, and we're talking about them. We're also talking about Swiggy has a new food delivery CEO. Rohit Kapoor joined in from Oyo, and we're going to tap into what's happening at Swiggy. Then, are you a Bira and a Sula fan? Uh,
Both. I don't
yes.
discriminate when it comes to alcohol.
We're talking about Sula and how they're filing for their IPO, and there's some pieces in the article that Morning Context put down about Bira as well. Again, there are some Morning Context like lines about Bira, unfortunately. And then this brand, which we both love, Nikki, is half a century old, and we shall talk
Oh
about
my
it.
god.
Oh, sorry,
Is this
Nike.
your attempt at a midlife crisis joke? I appreciate it. I
Yes, yes.
appreciate it.
I will explain why I said Nikki after the break. But for that, you have to hold on to suspense till advertisers do their thing, if we have advertisers. But otherwise, we will see you very quickly on Think Fast.
Hello, everybody. It's been another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. On The Habit Coach, Ashton is joined by actress Kubra Seth. They talk about her newly launched book, Open Book, Not Quite a Memoir. On Cider Says It's Cock and Bull, Cider Sriram Puneet and Ayushi talk about Kerala becoming the first state to have its own internet service. On Naan Curry, Sadaf and Archit talk to UK-based chef Chetan Sharma on how Indian food is perceived in Britain. On a niche thing, Anish talks to Jude, CEO and founder of the Revolver Club. They discuss hi-fi systems and vinyl collections. And on Ikaduka Economy, Abhinav talks to renowned cyber lawyer Dr. Pawan Duggal. They discuss how to safeguard one's plastic money. Once again, I'd like to remind you all that we got some exciting merchandise out there for you guys. Go to the IBM Podcast website and click on the shop tab and check out our first collection of t-shirts. Also, do follow us on social media. We're IBM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. We're also on YouTube. Do remember to check out a bunch of our channels over there. And also remember, if you're enjoying this show or any of our other shows for that matter, please tell a friend. Word of mouth is very, very helpful for spreading the word. And finally, we'd like to thank our sponsors this week, both Lifestyle, Small Case, Capgemini, and Intel vPro. Thank you so much for making this possible.
Welcome back to Think Fast, where I have background noise. Lulu is asking for dinner, but while Lulu asks for dinner, what are you talking about first? What are we talking about first? YouTube. Are you a YouTube user?
Yes, Queen.
Do you know what
I
YouTube
am.
is?
Oh my God. What a great introduction to our segment. I'm surprised you haven't started with speaking of, which is your
Speaking of,
favorite way to introduce
yes,
a
yes.
new segments.
Speaking of
No,
is
but
my
dude,
standard
this
go-to.
This piece of news is actually pretty awesome for
Yeah.
multiple different reasons that I'll just get into. So, ladies and gents, the first topic is 14 years after its India launch, YouTube's annual revenues from the country have topped 1 billion for the very first time. It took them 14 years to get here,
Mm.
which basically means a bunch of different things. Obviously, slow and steady wins the race and this, that, and the other. But before we get into the chunk of the story and how YouTube got here, I think the biggest like hallelujah moment of this is, if you invest in the right things within a market and also
Yeah.
obviously have the ecosystem that Google brings with it. Advertising can be a very big business because this is literally just all advertising revenue. But you tell me, Varun, do you use YouTube?
Yes, it is my go-to streaming platform of choice. I watch this more than I watch Netflix or Hotstar or any other platform in that sense. But I feel that what you said about advertising is interesting, right? Because even if you look at what Netflix is having to do now, I don't ever see advertising as an add-on to content ever going away. It's just going to be
Hmm.
part of the tears that are there, and YouTube's really built a strong, robust machinery, and more than anything else, it's still the only platform who has constantly monetized content for creators as well, right? People do get that
Yeah.
paycheck. It's a whole different conversation, say how much of that share actually goes to creators, which is still feels like it's far lower than it needs to be. There are a lot of points to kind of cover about the just the negatives of how thumbnails need to work and etc. But just from a backbone standpoint, like what you just said, is that they have a solid data backbone, solid ad platform, and so much content on it that at some point of time this kind of had to happen here. And if you look at the Indian YouTuber ecosystem, um, it's actually one of the most diverse, because it has, remember, I look at across categories, right? Just the amount of content that's there and what all people can kind of have been able to do in their lives through it. You've seen lots of lives change for people. I mean, think about the finance creators who kind of popped up first. Think of people who kind of
Yeah.
popped in to do food. There's so many stories there, from a Kabita's Kitchen to Rachna Ranade on
Yep.
finance.
Yep. Yep.
While nobody's seen that on, let's say, Instagram, LinkedIn, etc., which are still a lot more. Okay, we need to put something out today, but the best thing about YouTube is you could make a video about once, and then for the rest of your life, you could actually make money off it. And so, I mean, that's my perspective. I think in India they've done a good job at really figuring out the market, really working with consumers, also figuring out ways to have things work over the kind of internet services we have and smartphones, etc. But I think all in all, it's kind of like something for everyone to follow.
Yeah, 100%, and we can double tap on that creator piece in just a bit. But I think YouTube and even Google at large, right, is a great example of how instant gratification does not go a long way, but the power of compounding does, right? So,
Yeah.
for example, a quick data point. From this article is YouTube's ad income grew by over 30% year on year starting in 2017, and the rate jumped to about 45% in 2021. Now, if you literally went to a VC in India and said, I'm growing 30% year on year,
Mm,
they would just be like, please shut shop and find something else to do, right?
yeah.
Yeah, I think the great sort of story over here is that, if you're focused on long term gains and long term goals, you eventually get there, right? And obviously this doesn't apply to anything and everything, but if you look at YouTube strategy, whether it's the revenue that they've been able to deliver on and grow on, or for example, even if you look at their focus on video, remember when YouTube came to India, there was no short form video or
Yeah.
even video consumption to the scale at which it's now at all, right? And obviously one big
Yeah.
thing that helped them was geo making data extremely cheap, video usage getting mass adoption and penetration, just because it's cheap to watch videos online, and also videos are much more easier to see online than they ever were before. And most importantly, I think if you look at the way YouTube has invested in its creators and the kind of companies that have come out of YouTube, I think that's what's fascinating. Like, I remember in LBB's early years, right?
Mm,
Your real viral content companies came from YouTube. It was your
yeah.
AIB, TVF, all of them
Unacademy.
really. Yeah, Unacademy, there you go. A lot of edtech, which really started on YouTube. So what they've done with this whole creator piece and even investment in creators has been super interesting to see.
Yeah, and also although while everyone's moved to short form, and even YouTube has YouTube Shorts now, which are pushing out a lot more. Um, and I feel it's very early days for YouTube Shorts to figure out how well that works. If you talk to any YouTuber who's done research on it, will tell you your YouTube long form needs to be on a separate channel, your Shorts have to be on a separate channel. There's a lot of that discussion. I think there's an entire segment of YouTube telling you how to kind of succeed on YouTube because of the enormity of what the ocean there is.
Yeah.
But I feel the only piece here to look at is that obviously ads are the singular source of revenue for them. All the other features like subscriptions, etc., aren't really a big part of this. And how do you bring ads into the picture for shorts is going to be interesting.
Hmm.
Also looking at the fact that you have someone like an Instagram who's just announced that they're merging videos and reels together, and that
Yeah.
at some point TikTok in the US now runs up to 3 minutes. At some point, I feel all of this is going to collide, and you're going to have everything which will have ads in it. And I feel YouTube at that point will have the most robust system because they're built for podcasts, so they can compete with the
Hmm.
Spotify, etc. They've built short form also smartly by having it as a beta program and not necessarily trying to just like slap it
The
on there.
core of,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and the algo also is doing smart things, right? I mean, the people are actually testing out. Okay, if I just put shorts on a normal channel versus putting shorts on a dedicated channel, how does that work? And it's showing different kinds of traction in terms of just numbers there. But I feel in an overall basis, if you look at an India lens, it's been a true democratizer to really say that there's one
100%. Yeah.
platform that works for everybody across segments, across if they're in like if they're in a mainstream city versus being in let's say a tier 2 tier 3 or even rural in that sense. That I feel has been the biggest boon for them, what they've actually done for the market, because everybody else is fed off of that thought process, but nobody
Yeah.
has till date been able to give that kind of data or that kind of monetization.
I think another really interesting thing that came out in this article, and I think this ties back with the point that you were making earlier about just that YouTube's been able to dabble in so many different types of video content itself. So, like this data point is nearly 55 million people streamed YouTube TV in India as of December 2021. About 45% of the total watch time on the app is linked to content lasting 21 minutes or longer. And
Mm,
I think this is the thing that's fascinating, right? Where all video doesn't have to deliver on the same end result or the same end goal. So, for example, I think YouTube's niche is actually in that like educational category. So, for instance, do I go to YouTube to watch home decor videos the same way I watch home decor videos on Instagram? Yes, but like YouTube will have many more how to's, makeovers, etc., etc. So it's almost like they've taken categories, but the type of content available for those categories on YouTube is very informative. So it's like you're passing your time, but you don't feel bad about how you're passing your time because you're like
mm,
learning something as you go along. And then to the other 2 points, right? When you talk about democratizing anything, I mean, look at what they've done for education. That Unacademy and so many other large creators
mm,
like Ravi Handa and the likes have come out of YouTube. Goes to show the power of how long form content, long form in this case being anywhere in between 8 to 21 minutes. Another interesting data point on this article was the average live stream on YouTube lasts for 45 minutes with
mm.
90% being the watch time, which is unheard of, dude. Do you
People
know
do
how many
all
people
night chess
survive?
live streams in India. If you
You know
haven't
how
watched those
much?
ever.
And compare that to an Instagram, bro. Like Instagram live,
Mm,
you see the drop offs happening in like 10 seconds. If the content isn't stimulating people, peace out. But
yeah.
YouTube somehow has managed to uh, uh, make us like not slaves to our deficit attention. So I don't know, but there's something very counterintuitive but also very right about YouTube. Like, remember the time when TikTok came up and everyone was just like, death of YouTube, short
Yes.
form video content is the future. But you kind of see that all video is not created equal, and video at the end of
Yeah.
the day is just a medium. It's more about the underlying job to be done for the consumer that YouTube has been able to identify for itself and do differently.
Yeah, I think the big thing for them going ahead is really going to be able to crack shopping, right? YouTube shopping is not in India yet. They acquired SimSim sometime back, and what they're really trying to do is to kind of get into that space. And obviously, in India, there are a lot of players in this, from Moj, Mintra, Nykaa, etc. So I feel in India, that's going to be the interesting one to look at. Is till now they're very ad focused, but the more shopping focused they become, especially with that Shopify tie-up, they've just kind of announced that partnership in the US. It's going to be interesting to see how they tap into this. While on the other end, what I'm most gung ho about is that there's this entire stream of creators who are literally becoming the next generation of filmmakers by just creating on YouTube first, and not necessarily saying, okay, I want to go through the regular ropes like a lot of people have.
And with that, the next story
We shall
is.
move. Next, let's order something. Are you a Swiggy user or a Zomato user? On that note,
What
I
was
thought
that
I'll ask.
intro? First, let's just start with, do you order something online? My God, bro, your introductions today are vataj, vataj. Yes, I do
Vataj ho
order
gaya aaj.
on Swiggy,
Nice.
and it's a great app. But what is the point of the story, sir?
No, my context of asking you that is because so Swiggy is just appointed Oyo's Rohit Kapoor as their food delivery CEO. They've been going through a bit of a reshuffle across the board. If you look at it, they've obviously now got people in charge of multiple verticals in that sense, and also it's their move towards being like this whole like multi-use case kind of a platform from what they were. Because if you look at Zomato today, you obviously have a lot of stuff happening within Zomato. Swiggy obviously is trying to move in that direction and maybe kind of do it in their own way. They already have, just looking at this article, they have a CEO for milk delivery, which is through Super Daily. There's Ankit Mehrotra who's running Dine Out, which is a restaurant delivery discovery in that sense, and so on and so forth. For Instamart, Karthik Gurumurthy. I'm just reading off paper right now. But do you see this as a clear, just them working towards IPO, or do you see this as just like Swiggy kind of structuring things differently for just kind of make the business more robust, or both? What is your response?
I think um I think Harsha is one of the best executors in this country. Like the way
Mm.
he has built out Swiggy is nothing short of phenomenal. I think their product focus, their focus on, like, business fundamentals, and then obviously now they've been investing a lot in building their brand through content layers, this, that, and the other. I think the way he's built his business out has been fantastic,
Agree.
um, uh, so one part of it is that, and I think the second part of it is, irrespective of whether they're preparing for an IPO or they're just trying to streamline systems better internally. I think after a point when businesses get to a certain scale, you need one or two types of people who are at the helm of your key verticals, right? One is either people who you trust. And you
Yeah.
see a lot of large companies do that, right? Where if you look at their C-suite, even if you look at Zomato, like a lot of people have risen through the ranks. It's not like
Mm.
they've had too many, imports in the business, or people who've, joined to launch new verticals for the company, or this, that, or the other. So, and I think that reflects in this as well. The second part of it is obviously, now that Swiggy has so much going on, it only makes sense to have someone who understands operations really well, and who also understands operations at scale. And if you think
Yeah.
about it, there are very few companies who companies like Swiggy can recruit from. There was a point in time when any brand that wanted to build its C-suite team would pull from Hindustan Unilever, or one of the large, or the Tatas or the Reliances of the world. But I think from within the startup ecosystem, you have very few companies who have had to deal with this kind of revenue scale, these kind of unit economics, and also in Swiggy's case, these kind of merchants, right? Because Oyo and Swiggy, the similarity in between the two is just a type of merchants who are at the underbelly of these businesses, which is
Yeah.
typically a small to mid-size, highly disaggregated, kind of companies. So, long story short, I love the way they've built out their business. I have a lot of respect for Harsha Majeti, who's currently their CEO of anything and everything, and it makes sense, dude. You either bring in talent from outside that understands the pressure cooker that C-suite executives have to face, or you rise within the ranks and make them generalists, and really have people who you can trust.
Yeah, and it makes sense for him to kind of move to that group CEO level because till now he was overseeing the food delivery business as well as the overall piece. and the more verticals they've added, and they've added a lot of verticals in recent years, especially I think post the whole COVID, scenario. I think they've also kind of smartly kind of broken this down into multiple verticals, and added a lot there. It makes sense for him to move to a group level and kind of build each of them with one person leading it. I think what will also be interesting to see is that, how do they kind of address how this is growing versus a Zomato, because they can look at what's working, not working with Zomato from being a public company. So I feel this is almost a way for them to kind of look at that as well in a certain way, and kind of plan for their future.
Yes, that is true.
Yes. So let's order something from Swiggy, although we don't get alcohol in Swiggy because our next story is about alcohol, but that'll only happen after this break. So we'll take a quick break and we'll be right back with Think Fast. Welcome back to Think Fast, where we have a special guest host for this segment, because some parts of the article that was written about Bira and Sula included little angry face from our friends from Morning Context, who, as always, have to get angry with someone, and they were like, "Kyun hote ho itna? Kyun? Why are you so angry? Look at this head bobbing. Hulk is bobbing his head right now." And Suchita like, "Can I just take over the story now and move on?" But hello, Suchita.
Yes.
Hi.
Oh my
Look at this
God. So
Nandu boy.
listeners, you can't, you, if you're listening to us, if you're listening to this as a podcast, you can't see this retarded creature that Varun is very
The
strangely
baby Hulk
fondling
with his
and
head bobbing.
shaking. My God, what is it with your, have you been to a therapist? Before we get to the
No, I was
story,
gifted this.
can
Yeah,
we
I
talk
went for a
about,
talk the other day to Ahmedabad, and they gave me
and they gifted you, they
bobbleheads.
really must have liked your talk for gifting you
Yeah.
a
They
angry
gave me three
green
bobbleheads.
bobblehead. Oh my God. This is why Savitri Jindal is worth 12 billion and
I get
we
bobbleheads.
are not. We get paid in bobbleheads. Um,
Yes.
but getting back to the story, so I haven't, I mean, to be honest, I haven't read this article, but I am unsurprised that, Morning Context has taken a little bit of a snafu sort of like take on Sula versus Bira. But, let me kick off this story with two things, right? Keeping the comparison in between Sula and Bira aside for a second, because that comparison is stupid to begin with. I mean, Bira, didn't build a new market. They entered a market which was dominated by
Exactly.
Kingfisher, but obviously approached the market in very unique and interesting ways in order to gain market share. Sula did the other, right? They did what is genuinely very tough to do, which is build a new market up from scratch. And, building a market through marketing is one thing, but building a market through literally creating products that, didn't necessarily even grow in India. It's not like India was like a wine exporting country, where this like bacha of some big wine exporter said, "Chalo, main iska D2C banata hu," and then made Sula, right?
Mm.
As
Yeah.
is the case with, for example, maybe like tea companies or coffee companies. This is like literally, creating wine out of like soil which wasn't happening in our country before. So I think
Yeah.
what they've been able to achieve is no mean feat. What they have the mother of all moats. They have the moats of
Mm.
manufacturing. They have the moats of time, because anyone who likes consuming wine or has read up on wines, like time is the most important thing when it comes to really getting the juice out of the grape, literally and figuratively. And
Yeah.
they've grown bit by bit. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like
Mm.
their revenue has grown 100% year on year. Again, in fiscal FY 2022, the company posted revenue from operations of 453 crores, rising by 8.6% from 417 crores in the previous fiscal. So my point is that this isn't really a 100% year on year growth business. But and I have another point to make, which I'll just quickly say and then we'll get to you, is I think this is why choosing your investors matters a lot, because it takes
Yeah.
a certain kind of investor to be okay with that compounding 10%, 30%, 40% year on year growth, and knowing that when the time comes, this business will be significant. But what about you, sir? What do you think?
So actually, some of the points you made were actually in the article, right? And in many ways, the article paints a great picture of Sula as a business. Just the fact that they kind of built this from scratch, really, because there wasn't a wine. The wine category itself was not really there when they started off,
Hmm.
and the fact that they've actually gone from what 33% of market share in 2009 FY 2009 to 52% in FY 20, and obviously even going even higher now. Shows that have been slow and steady, like you said, but also really smartly also focusing on where they grow, where they focus on. A large part of the wine consumed in India is actually in Karnataka and Maharashtra, so they're actually focused on. And also, a lot of the grape production also happens in this area as well. So they have smartly also focused on not trying to go too wide too quickly. They built it brick by brick in that sense, or grape by grape, if that's the term to use here.
Hmm.
And what's been interesting is they have multiple brands within them. They've really taken over the general category of wine, right? If today look at someone who wants to start off drinking wine as a base level consumer, your tendency will be to go towards Sula. I think if I remember the article, there was one particular wine of theirs which I think is like one of the highest drunk wines in the country. I'm going to try and find that in the article. But I think all in all, what makes this whole piece interesting is the fact that even their marketing has been so unique, right? They actually got in, and I'm forgetting her name. They actually got in a consultant from Europe who kind of came in to kind of help them market. Hence, the Sula Fest happened, etc. They've
Yeah.
never been a traditional marketer of alcohol in that sense, so they haven't really gone like what all alcohol brands have done, right? Look at surrogate marketing, all that stuff. They've stuck to a certain way of doing things. And what you said about investors is actually what even the Morning Context article actually says, is that um,
Hmm.
the fact that they chose investors who looked at this from like, okay, this is long term growth. We're not looking at vanity metrics. World Invest and I think Sama Capital have been on the cap table since 2009. And at the end of the day, today, if goes for IPO, it's a solid business to back, because we're at a time when wine culture is finally predominantly there. It's
Hmm.
become something you want to show in your house, that you have wine at home. People are having wine
Yeah.
with their dinner, etc. And people are keeping wine at home, which means that the premium segment, when it grows, and you already have the general category, it's actually a great time for them to consider going for an IPO, because that gives them that extra piece to kind of scale up as well. So it's all in all great business. The only thing, like I mentioned, the Bira
Hmm.
comparison, which kept popping up in the article, just kind of spoke about the fact that what Bira kind of ended up doing is, when they raised a lot of capital, and I think a lot of the beers in this category ended up doing, is that capital came in, overspent on marketing, and at some point couldn't really sustain their growth. Is the point that was being made, but
But that's like a
overcrowded
stupid
market.
point, right? That's like apples
Yeah,
and oranges. I mean, like I started by saying, which is Bira had to beat the competition. And the only way in which they could genuinely beat the competition is by going to consumers with a different narrative around beer. Like, they're actually, what they needed to spend on was marketing. Obviously they had a better tasting product than Kingfisher, at least back in the day. I haven't had a bira in a while, but you know what I mean. It's like comparing apples and oranges. I mean, one genuinely had to spend fast and quick to get market share. um it's kind of like, if you look at the criticism that cred gets, right? I think there was a lot of understandable criticism around why is cred spending so much of money on customer acquisition, this, that, and the other. But the truth of the matter is, if you are able to go to consumers with a differentiated proposition where you're clearly being able to articulate why your product is a better alternative to others that exist in the market, if you're able to get enough consumers to round up around you, the way you are able to monetize them in the future is significant. And Bira has done that through in their own way as well, whether it's their merchandise. They used to have that April Fool's Fest. They've also had to segment very quickly. They have that premium segment that they're playing in, which is their IPAs. And then they obviously have Bira Boom, which is their like Sasta Tikau beer, product line. So, long story short, I mean, I haven't read the article, so I don't want to say it, too much. But comparing Sula to, Bira is literally comparing wine and beer, like very two different use cases with very two different types of occasions and triggers for consumers to purchase or gift.
yeah. And last part I'd make is, I think the only context they were trying to give, but it ended up not sounding as robust, was the fact that you need to kind of build a business with a Sula kind of mindset and not a Bira kind of mindset. And again, like you said, it's like it's apples and oranges.
Apples
So
and
I don't think
oranges.
you can talk that way. But speaking of apples and oranges, do you know why I said
That has
Nikki at the start
literally
of this?
nothing to do with our story. But let me entertain you
uh,
for 1 second.
do you know why I said Nikki at the beginning of the show instead of saying Nike? is because I remember a long time ago you would get a lot of fakes of Nike which had Nikki on it, or the tick would be wrong, or I've actually seen one great one which had Nike, Puma, Adidas all on them, right? To get those fakes and Fila in the sole. And it is so
Oh, wow.
aspirational to own a pair of Nike sneakers that some people
Hmm.
just buy a Nike and say, I couldn't afford a Nike, so I got myself a Nike in that sense. Before social media, this was, as I'm old, as I mentioned earlier. So when you're talking about Nike hitting a half century, I'm like, I got nostalgic about how I still,
Old you are.
that was one of my first pair when I looked at Nike then. And I bought my last pair of Nike sneakers yesterday. Now, my daughter gave me a pair of Nike sneakers for my 40th. Which I
How
only paid for,
sweet.
but still, but she's
But
5.
get yes, no, but 50 years of Nike, dude. I mean, apart from nostalgic, how else do you feel about their success? Because this is like one of the businesses that shouldn't have become as big as it has become today. But
Yeah.
like, talk about two. Speaking of Bira and Sula, I think Nike is like example 101 of the power of marketing.
Yeah, and just really having a pulse on culture, really knowing when to change what you are as a brand. I mean, obviously, from going from a running shoe brand and to kind of taking over, literally, the Jordan was the thing, right? If you think about just the Jordan by itself, if the PNL is so crazy, the amount of money the Air Jordan makes. And so on and so forth. They've always made the right moves, especially from tapping into what consumers want, what sports people kind of want to get into as well. I think, to build that aspiration you have to understand culture. I think that's been their top game. I mean, there are many things that people you can have issues with them about, be it from a diversity standpoint, or like how they've treated a lot of stuff that's happened within the organization. But you have to kind of give it props for the fact that this is by far, like, every case study where you talk about, okay, this is a great marketing case, or this is a great way to kind of tap into culture, you always end up defaulting to a Nike. In many
Yeah.
cases, and I think that kind of shows the fact that they've been so consistent for 50 years in really doing this. And more than anything else, it's still kept the product evolving. They didn't stagnate that part. Like, and now you can get your own version of a Nike sneaker in the metaverse.
Yeah, I think it's that quote that Godin has, right? Which is if Nike had to make a hotel, you could literally imagine exactly what it would look like. But
Yeah.
if a Hilton or a Hyatt had to make a shoe, you won't know what it would be. And I think Nike is one of those like rare companies that has that literally has a persona associated with it. And
Yeah.
obviously one big part of it is they were one of the first few who really looked at sports people as the ultimate endorsement. And even
Yeah.
if you've read like Phil Knight's book Shoe Dog, he
Yeah.
talks a
I
lot
have.
about how running wasn't running wasn't as mainstream as what Nike's been able to make it. Wanting to be like an athlete wasn't necessarily as covetable as what Nike made it to and for consumers. And I don't know, man. I think hindsight is 2020, and when you look back at Nike's success, it's very easy to make case studies about what went right and what went wrong and this, that, and the other. If you think about it, just the name Nike isn't the world's easiest thing to say, right?
Yeah.
Nikki, whatever the hell else folks may
Yeah.
call it. But I think I'm rambling a bit because I'm like the world's biggest fan of how Nike's been able to build themselves. But the one thing that I'll add to this is Nike's genius to me has been in the way that even though they're such a big brand, $44.6 billion in revenue, they still feel small. I
Yeah.
don't know what it is about this brand, but it still feels niche and cool. You
It
know what I
doesn't
mean?
feel
Like,
mainstream.
yeah. And there's something about the way in which, despite being so big, they make every owner of a Nike, whether it's you, me, whoever else, they make every like Nike shoe owner feel special. And I think that's their secret sauce, in my opinion.
That's so true, right? Because once you become mainstream, you suddenly become like, oh, you're not the next cool thing in that sense. And while you had many brands kind of come in, and there still are many coming in that sense, um, it's not a. It's always been okay. I'll get myself a pair of Nikes, but then maybe I'll try the new one as well. It's not an either or. It's always an and with a Nike,
Yeah.
because you got to have like I'm a sneakerhead, and I've gotten about close to about 40 plus sneakers, predominantly Nike. And that's because I just generally, from a design standpoint, if you actually dig into just their thought process on design and how they kind of build their sneakers, from the Air Max to the Jordan, looking at the silhouettes and the colorways and everything else, there is a beauty to how all of their sneakers have been designed, which very few others people could kind of talk about Adidas or a New Balance in that sense. But I
Hmm.
still feel that if you look at it from a consistency standpoint, from for design, nobody comes even close. And I feel that's been their secret sauce. Just the design culture, and overall this whole like having that tap on. How do I not make sure that I become like what a Bata was in India? They'll never
Yeah.
become that to the world. I feel that's really what I would say.
Yeah, and just one like last thing over here, which I personally really like about Nike is they're unafraid of lending their brand to other brands. So, for example, I don't know if you saw, but they recently did this partnership with Jacquemus, that like culty French brand that all fashion chicks are like super into. Or, for instance, what they did with Michael Jordan and the Air Jordans, right?
Yeah,
They've never shied away from lending their name. And if you've seen The Last Dance, when they partnered with Michael Jordan on the Air Jordans, Michael Jordan was climbing to his peak. He wasn't at his peak there and then, right?
yeah, yeah. And
Even
Reebok
with
was the sponsor for with the predominant sneaker in the NBA.
exactly. Reebok, okay, whoever it was, Reebok, Adidas, whoever it was. But
It was
long
Reebok.
story short, I feel like and it's very rare, sorry, like I'm like gushing over this brand, but it's very rare to see brands that could have an attitude or like an air about themselves saying sorry, but I will only partner with a brand that is at my level or higher. Like you saw like Adidas partnership with Easy, and
Mm.
Nike, interestingly enough, previously had a partnership with Kanye West, which fell through
Yeah,
because
yeah,
Kanye West is like strange and absurd and like crazy. But long story short, like
yes,
I think growing through collaborations and growing in ways where you're lending to other people and other brands and having them give back to you. I think that's just beautiful. But I'm going to stop talking now because I am like drooling over all things
yes.
Nike.
I will also stop because I have too many sneakers and I don't want to buy one more. Although I know I will, because my birthday is coming soon.
You were
But
just sad
anyway,
about your birthday. How are you like treating yourself to more
I like
sneakers now?
gifts. I'm not saying I'm averse to gifts. I'm just sad. I just generally meh about my birthdays. But speaking of meh, it's time for a break. Oh, but breaks are not meh. Breaks are amazing. So we'll take our final break and be right back with one question from one of our listeners and recommendations. Welcome back to Think Fast, where I have a singy voice right now. I don't know why. I don't know what a singy means, but we have a question from one of our listeners on YouTube, watchers and listeners, if it's on YouTube. Um, Emigre Esquire, if that is your actual name, um, asked us SoftBank's erstwhile CEO Marcelo Clore stepped down. Is all well? Thoughts on the current state and future prospects of SoftBank investments in India? Bit of a hardcore question.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a
I don't
hardcore
have much to
question
say.
for people who haven't been, stalking SoftBank for a while.
Yeah,
SoftBank has obviously gone very, very, very quiet for
yeah,
understandable reasons. One part of it being a couple of their golden child slash children, one of which was obviously WeWork, another of
yeah,
which was Oyo. Like, I don't know if you remember, but like
yeah.
Oyo rooms was, pimped out everywhere. Snapdeal was another one of their like golden nuggets. But I feel like yeah, I don't know what's happening at SoftBank, but I think what they definitely need is a little bit of a rejig in terms of just what people's perception of them is.
Mm.
Um, and I think the
And they can
problem with
start
that
from the
is
top.
they've had. it starts from the top 100%, and it goes back to the, unfortunately, with every catastrophic story that has happened in Silicon Valley, especially, right, and even in
Mm.
India for that matter. Like our non-friends at Morning Context, not that they
Mm.
aren't our friends, we just don't know them, guys, just clarifying. But
Yes.
like the way Ashish Mishra has gone after Oyo is no laughing matter. Or
Mm.
you know what I mean, like I feel like a lot
Yeah.
of their goody two shoe companies have literally been ripped apart when it comes to financial unit economics metrics and this, that, and the other. And not that I'm tracking the space or have any insider information, but it seems like they need a little bit of a facelift, and maybe some of these
Yeah.
changes are going to help them get closer to exactly that.
Yeah. So I don't have too much perspective on this, but I am agreeing with your response to this question. Maybe I should do a little bit of a read in on SoftBank and what they're doing. But on to recommendations. What's your recommendation for this week?
My recommendation for this week is, guys, please go and read Shoe Dog by Phil Knight if you haven't, and you will only then understand why I was like rambling and going on and saying like and 6,000 times during the Nike segment. I just think that brand is great. I'm not even like a shoe stand like Varun, but I just think as a marketer, what they have been able to build is phenomenal, once in a lifetime, very, very, very rare to do. And that they've not fallen into the trap of making their product a commodity is a very tough call for founders to make. So please, if you haven't already, read
Amazing book.
read Shoe Dog by Phil Knight, a phenomenal book.
My recommendation is actually this podcast. I haven't binged a podcast in a long time, and I binged an entire series over the weekend. It's called Batman Unburied. It's on Spotify. It's a fiction Batman story fiction podcast, but it's so good. Like you get sucked in, you're trying to figure out what's happening, but it's just so nicely done. One interesting one is Hassan Minaj plays the Riddler, which I thought was a very interesting
Oh,
casting choice there.
wow.
Yeah, yeah. Which I was like, I heard this, I know this voice, and I went to the credits and I saw his name there. But a great series, about 10 episodes, not super long. I think the longest episode about half an hour. But binged it over the weekend. I haven't binged a show in a long time, but I binged a podcast. So listen to Batman Unburied. There's also a Hindi version, which Mantras directed, and has a lot of Indian talent from Amit Saad, etc., who kind of voice stuff. So if you want to kind of pop in and listen to the Hindi one, you could do that as well.
Thanks for the recommendation. And with that, is it our show? Is it our show? Under one
It is
hour.
our show.
You
It is
go,
our show.
Glenn Coco.
Yes. Bye, guys. Me and Hulk saying bye. Baby Hulk is shaking his head. He's like, "Oh, time for dinner? Yes, it is time for dinner. Yes, yes, it
And
is.
maybe
Yes, it
next
is.
time, guys,
Yes."
Varun's going to be happier and chirpier and more
Yes.
enthusiastic about turning 69
Ah,
years of age.
69 years of age. That's all that's left. I am going to. I've heard the term called modern elder. I think I'm just trying to be a modern elder now.
Yes, you are.
Okay, on that
Congratulations
note,
on that
bye.
look.
Bye, guys. Toodles.
Bye, toodles.